The day my brother-in-law set up his PlayStation in my workshop, my wife looked me in the eye and said, "Garth's living here now. If you can't handle that, you know where the door is." I said one word, "Done." Then I packed a bag, drove to my mate's place in Puke, and rang my lawyer first thing Monday. See, the house was mine, bought and paid for years before I ever met her, and we'd signed papers saying it stayed that way. When the police turned up with the trespass notice, well, I'll get to that. Let me back up, because people always ask how a bloke my age ends up in a mess like this. I'm 64, retired builder, spent 40-odd years swinging a hammer around the Bay of Plenty. Bought my place in Papamoa back when sections out there were still cheap as chips, 3-bedroom brick and tile, big double garage I converted into a proper workshop, 5 minutes from the beach. Paid the mortgage off the year I turned 55. That house was my retirement, plain and simple. I married Lois 6 years ago. I was 58, she was 55. Second marriage for both of us. My first divorce cleaned me out properly, lost the family home in Rotorua, started again from scratch, so when Lois and I decided to make it official, I told her straight, "I love you, but I've been burned before." We saw a lawyer together and signed a contracting out agreement. Her lawyer explained it, my lawyer explained it, everyone signed in front of witnesses. The Papamoa house stayed mine, her savings stayed hers, and whatever we built together from the wedding onwards, we'd share. She was fine with it at the time. More than fine. She said any man who'd been through what I'd been through had every right to protect himself. Funny how people forget the things they agreed to when it stops suiting them. Now, Lois's younger brother, Garth. 57 years old, and I don't think the man has held a job longer than 8 months in the entire time I've known him. Always some story. The boss at the Kiwi Fruit Pack House had it in for him. The crew at the transport yard were a pack of bullies. His back was crook, but never crook enough to stop him hauling a chili bin to the TAB. 2 ex-wives, both of whom apparently took everything, though as far as I could tell neither of them got much more than peace and quiet out of the deal. For years Garth had been doing the rounds. 6 months at his sister Janine's place until she shifted to Brisbane, and I've always suspected the move was at least partly to get away from him. Then a cousin sleep out in Whakatane. Then a mate's garage in Mount Montgomery until the mate's missus put her foot down. Every time a couch dried up, Lois's phone would ring, and there'd be tears and hard luck stories, and a couple of $100 would quietly leave our joint account. I didn't love it, but it was her money too, and a couple of $100 here and there wasn't going to sink us. I kept my mouth shut. That was probably my first mistake. The hint started about a year ago. Garth would come round for a Sunday roast and walk through the place like a valuer. "Gee, you've got a lot of room for 2 people. That workshop's bigger than most flats I've lived in. Must be nice, all the space going to waste." I'd change the subject. Lois would laugh it off. But I clocked it, and I told her one night in bed, "Calm as you like, he is never moving in here. I want that understood now, before it ever becomes a question." She agreed. Said her brother needed to sort his own life out, that he was 57, not 17. Then about 10 weeks ago, the phone call came. Garth, sobbing down the line at 9 o'clock at night. His mate had given him the boot with no warning. There's always no warning, you notice, never any mention of the unpaid board or the empty bottles, and he was sleeping in his Falcon at the Freedom camping spot by the river. Lois was in pieces. Could he please stay with us, just a week, 2 at the most, while he found a flat? Against every instinct I'd built up over 6 decades on this earth, I said yes. 1 week, maybe 2. He could have the spare room. And I said it to his face when he arrived, "Mate, this is a fortnight, tops. I want to see you on Trade Me looking at flats every single day." He turned up that night with the Falcon riding low on its springs. Suitcases. Banana boxes. A bar fridge. A weight bench, for a man who I'd never once seen lift anything heavier than a remote. When I asked why a bloke staying 2 weeks needed a bar fridge, he said he had nowhere else to store his gear. First red flag, and I let it sail right past me. By day 3 he'd rearranged the spare room and asked Lois if we could shift the linen cupboard contents so he had more wardrobe space. By day 5 he was cooking fry-ups in my kitchen at all hours and leaving the pan on the stove for someone else to deal with. By the end of the first week, his washing was draped over my deck rail, his fishing rods were leaning against my workbench, and he'd started telling me which channel he wanted on at 7 o'clock. The fortnight came and went. When I asked about flats, he said the rental market was a disgrace, everything was $1,000 a week or full of gangs, and a man his age couldn't be expected to flat with strangers. Lois backed him. We can't just turf him onto the street, love. He's family. Week 3, he found my workshop. I came home from Bulls one Tuesday and there he was, sitting in my workshop, in my old man's chair, PlayStation hooked up to a telly he'd lugged in from somewhere, my tools shoved up one end of the bench to make room for his setup. 40 years of trade, that workshop. My father's chisels are in there. And this man, who had contributed exactly nothing to anything in his entire life, had colonized it like he was doing me a favor by filling the empty space. I told him to pack it down. He gave me this wounded look and said, "You weren't using it, mate. No need to get territorial." Territorial. In my own home, that I built half the cabinetry in with my own hands. That night I laid it out for Lois. He's out by the end of the month, or this is going to get ugly. She begged for more time. He's trying, she said. He's got viewings lined up, she said. I asked to see one single viewing confirmation, one application, one email from a property manager. There wasn't one. There was never going to be one. Garth had found the softest landing of his life and he had no intention of leaving it. And he got bolder, the way they do once they know your missus is in their corner. Started commenting on what I ate, bit heavy on the red meat for a man your age, Told Lois I had the cricket up too loud. Helped himself to my beers in the garage fridge and replaced them with nothing. One morning I caught him going through the mail on the kitchen bench, opening a power bill. When I asked him what the hell he was doing, he said he was keeping an eye on the household outgoings since he was part of the household now. I told him he wasn't part of anything. He was a guest who'd overstayed by a month. He smirked and said, "Better take that up with your wife, mate." So I did. And that's the night it all came apart. I waited until tea was done and I said, calmly, that I was giving Garth until Friday week, and that I'd help him load the Falcon myself. Lois put her fork down and there was this silence, and I realized the two of them had already talked. Already decided. She said, "He's got nowhere to go, and we've got 3 bedrooms. He's staying as long as he needs to. Months, a year, whatever it takes." I said that was never agreed, and would never be agreed, and that this was my house. And that's when she said it. Looked me dead in the eye, in the kitchen I'd renovated for her as a wedding present, and said, "Garth's living here now. If you can't handle that, you know where the door is. And Garth, I want you to picture this." Garth leaned back in my chair at my table with this little smile on his face, like a man watching his horse come in. Something went very quiet in me. I'd spent 40 years pricing jobs, and I knew a final figure when I heard one. So I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I said, "Done." You should have seen their faces. Lois blinked like I'd spoken Russian. Garth's smile fell off. I went to the bedroom, packed a bag, took my important documents from the safe, passports, the agreement, the house deeds, insurance papers, the lot, because at my age you learn to secure the paperwork before you do anything else, and I rang my old workmate Russ in Puke, who's been telling me for years his sleepout was mine if I ever needed it. Lois followed me down the hall saying she didn't mean it like that I was overreacting, that we should sit down and talk like adults. I said we'd done our talking. She'd given me a choice between my home with her brother in it, or no home at all, and I was simply choosing option 2 on my own terms. I was at Russ's by 10 that night. Slept better than I had in 2 months. Monday morning I rang my lawyer, same fella who did the contracting out agreement 6 years back. Lovely conversation, that one. He confirmed what I already knew. The house was my separate property, black and white, signed and certified. Lois had a right to proper process as my wife, and I'd never have dreamed of treating her otherwise. But Garth? Garth was nothing. Not a tenant, never paid a cent of board, nothing in writing, no tenancy in existence. In the eyes of the law he was a houseguest, and a houseguest can be trespassed. I gave Lois one last chance, because 40 years of marriage between two marriages teaches you to be fair even when you're furious. I rang her and said, he's out by Sunday, and you and I go to counseling, and we try to repair this. She cried and said I was making her choose between her husband and her brother. I said no, you already chose, at the kitchen table, in front of him. I'm just asking if you'd like to choose again. She said I was cruel. Said family means sacrifice. Said her brother was vulnerable. Her brother, at that moment, as I later found out from the neighbor, was on my deck with his mates, working through a crate, telling everyone he'd landed on his feet. So Friday, I went nuclear. My lawyer drafted a formal letter. I was returning to live in my own home. Garth's license to occupy, such as it ever was revoked, and he had 7 days to remove himself and his property. Hand delivered. I also let Lois know, in writing, that if she chose to leave with him, I wouldn't stand in her way, and the dissolution would proceed under the agreement she'd signed with full legal advice. Garth's response was to laugh it off. Told Lois lawyers' letters were toilet paper, that possession was 9/10 of the law, that I'd cave. He'd been getting his way with sob stories for 40 years, he genuinely could not imagine a world where one didn't work. Day 8, he was still there. So I drove home with Russ, walked in, my key still worked. He hadn't even thought to ask Lois to change the locks, not that she could have legally, and told him he was now trespassing and I was calling the police. He told me to go ahead, real staunch, arms crossed in my lounge. So I did. 2 officers came out, looked at the deeds, looked at the lawyer's letter, looked at Garth. And I'll remember this till the day I die. This 57-year-old man stood in my lounge and told the police that his sister had said he could live there, like a kid saying Mom said it was okay. The officer asked if his name was on any document connected to that address. It was not. They gave him the formal trespass warning right there, leave now, return and you'll be arrested. It took him 3 hours to load the Falcon, and he made a meal of every minute of it, sighing and slamming and muttering about heartless people. The weight bench wouldn't fit. I told him he could arrange a trailer within the week or I'd sell it to cover the beers he'd drunk. Lois stood on the driveway crying. Then she got in her own car and followed him. Her choice. Made twice now, in case there'd been any doubt the first time. She went to a friend's place in Papamoa East. Garth, last I heard, lasted 3 weeks there before the friend's husband had had enough, and he's now back in Whakatana in the cousin's sleep-out, telling anyone at the RSA who'll listen that his brother-in-law threw a defenseless man onto the street. Leaves out the bar fridge and the weight bench and the 2 months of free board, funnily enough. The story always improves with the telling when the teller's the one who got caught out. Lois and I are done. The dissolution's underway. Her lawyer took one look at the agreement and told her, in front of me at the round-table meeting, that it was watertight and she'd been advised of exactly this outcome when she signed it. She's keeping her savings and her super, as she always was, and she's living near her brother now, which I suppose is what she wanted, though I don't think she finds him as charming at close range these days. She rang me a month ago saying she'd made a terrible mistake, that Garth had been poisoning the well between us for years and she could see it now. I told her I was sorry too, sorry for both of us, but that a marriage where I rank below a 57-year-old man with a PlayStation isn't what I can climb back into. Some doors, once you walk through them, you don't get to walk back. I'm back in my own house. My tools are back on my bench. Dad's chisels are where they belong. Sunday mornings I have a coffee on the deck and listen to the tuay in the kauai tree and nobody tells me the cricket's too loud. Would I do anything differently? Yes. I'd have stopped it at the bar fridge. The moment a man arrives for a fortnight with furniture, you're not hosting a guest, you're being occupied, and every day you stay polite about it, you're pouring the concrete on their foundations. I gave him a fortnight and he took my marriage. If you take anything from an old builder's mistake, take this. Protect yourself on paper while everyone still loves each other, because by the time they don't, it's too late to ask. Believe what people show you the first time. A man who's burned through every couch in the Bay of Plenty isn't unlucky, he's the fire. And never, ever let anyone hand you an ultimatum in your own home, because the only dignified answer to "if you don't like it, you can leave" is the one I gave. Boundaries aren't cruelty. Boundaries are just the truth, said out loud, before the damage is done. The people who scream loudest about family being everything are usually the ones treating family like a free motel. Real family knocks before it moves the furniture. The thing that still gets me, sitting out here on the deck of a morning, is how slow I was to see it. Garth didn't take my marriage in one night. He took it a fortnight at a time, a bar fridge at a time, a beer at a time, and I let every one of those small thefts slide because I told myself a decent bloke doesn't make a fuss over little things. But the little things were never little. They were him laying foundations while I was being polite about the concrete. Cause and effect is a hard old teacher, but it's an honest one. I said yes to a fortnight, so I got 2 months. I stayed quiet at the bar fridge, so I lost the workshop. I tried to be understanding when Lois made excuses, so she learned that her brother's comfort mattered more to me than my own front door. Every soft choice I made got read as permission, and by the time I drew a line, the pair of them genuinely believed the line was mine to apologize for. People will treat you exactly as you've trained them to. I trained them badly, and I paid for the lessons. If there's anything worth carrying out of all this, it's 3 things I had to relearn at 64. The first is that doing the right thing isn't the same as being agreeable. Real decency has a spine in it. Letting Garth walk over me wasn't kindness, it was cowardice dressed up as patience, and it hurt the marriage more than any argument ever could have. The second is to use your head while you still can, before your heart's in a corner. The smartest thing I ever did was sign that agreement 6 years back when Lois and I still loved each other, because by the time love had left the building, the paperwork was the only fair witness in the room. Sort your protections out while everyone's still smiling. That's not cynicism, that's just looking ahead like a grown adult. And the third is grit, plain stubborn grit. It's one thing to know what's right and another thing entirely to stand in your own lounge while 2 people you cared about call you heartless to your face and not buckle. I nearly buckled. Part of me wanted to cave just to stop Lois crying. But I buckled my whole life, and look where it got me, a stranger in my dad's chair. Holding the line that night was the hardest, best thing I've done in years. So that's what I'd leave with you. Be good without being a doormat. Be clever before you have to be desperate. And when you finally know what's right, plant your feet and don't move, no matter who's shouting. A man who can manage those 3 things can lose a marriage and a brother-in-law in the same week and still wake up the next morning a free man, listening to the 2A, drinking his coffee in peace, in a house that's finally his own again.